part of what I'm so passionate about now is just the awareness around, eating disorders and disordered eating. It doesn't have a look. It doesn't have an aesthetic. I think in school growing up, we were just taught that it was like that very frail, underweight, kind of skin and bones type woman, typically like a white woman. And it comes in so many different shapes and sizes.
Hey, this is Chad Namiro.
And I'm Kelley Namiro. Welcome to the Balancing Chaos podcast,
a lifestyle podcast where we will interview guests about wellness, business, and just about everything in between.
Our goal is to help you develop a lifestyle that promotes health, wholeness, and success. Through our conversations, we hope to inspire you to live a beautiful, full, and joyful life as you navigate balancing the chaos.
We hope you enjoy.
Bonar is the CEO and co-founder of Oat Haus, a food company with the mission of bringing fun and play back to food and the most delicious granola butter I have ever tasted. That is their flagship product, and it is the world's first oat-based spread and was born out of Allie's eating disorder recovery, which we will get into today on the podcast because I know so many of my followers really follow me because I talk a lot about my eating disorder recovery and the whole journey with all of that. So I want to dive in to that topic with Allie and talk about her recovery journey. We're also going to talk about her journey as an entrepreneur because Oat Haus is available at over 1,200 stores, including Whole Foods, Sprouts, Harris Teeter, the Fresh Market, and so many more. If you haven't tried it yet, I highly recommend it. We keep it in our fridge. So join me in welcoming Allie to the show. Allie, it's very great to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Yay. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Amazing. So can we start by taking it back to your childhood? What was growing up in your house like? And when it comes to food, was that a big part of your upbringing? Was it part of your family culture? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because short answer is no. So I grew up in San Diego. I feel like both my parents were sort of those eat to live type people, like they met at a running club, we're both triathletes, like food was very much fuel. And it wasn't that they, didn't cook for us or we didn't have like home cooked meals, but it definitely wasn't a mainstay. And there was a lot of nights, my parents called them yo-yo nights, which means you're on your own. So it'd be like me pouring myself a bowl of cereal for dinner because my mom was starting her dental practice and, my dad did a lot of Ironman triathlons, if you're familiar. Mm-hmm. So he was like always training and yeah. So long story short, it was definitely didn't grow up with like a very food centric household. And so I think it's interesting. I actually was talking to my mom about this. Like it might, maybe it skips a generation or something because she was saying her mom actually was super, kind of the traditional like Martha Stewart type homemaker energy. And so because of that, my mom was like, I want to go the other direction, And so my mom is, if you ever meet her, she's like, goes to Vegas, goes to the Rolling Stones concerts. She's like very much, she's a lot of fun. But but to answer your question, it definitely wasn't in our family dynamic at all. And so it was really interesting that I sort of gravitated towards that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And when it comes to like your disordered, relationship with food, I said at the beginning, I had something like that. I struggled for a really long time, actually, for the better part of a decade. And I was someone who was never underweight. I was like always at a normal weight. So no one really knew. And so it was really easy for me to hide. So for me, it was anorexia and exercise bulimia. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? And I don't know if you ever did any sort of therapy or if you found out kind of like what the trigger was to kind of put you there. So I think that would all be a really interesting topic.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. I actually had a very similar experience where I didn't look like I had an eating disorder, like you said. I also studied nutrition in undergrad. And so I was able to use that to sort of disguise, I'm just the healthy one. I'm a nutrition student. And all my friends chalked it up to that too. They actually even kind of like praised me for my willpower. Oh my gosh, I wish I could just eat, chicken salads like you can, Allie. And inside, I'm like, oh my God, no, I want to be able to eat chicken fingers. Like I want to be able to not stress about food. And so I had a very similar experience, it sounds like to yours. And I think that's really such a huge part of what I'm so passionate about now is just the awareness around, eating disorders and disordered eating. It doesn't have a look. It doesn't have an aesthetic. I think in school growing up, we were just taught that it was like that very frail, underweight, kind of skin and bones type woman, typically like a white woman. And it comes in so many different shapes and sizes. So yeah, I think that kept me stuck for a long time. And I didn't seek help. I didn't seek treatment because I felt like maybe I'm not sick enough. Like maybe I'm not, I'm not actually struggling. Like clearly I don't have a problem because no one around me can tell, like clearly I don't have a problem because I look the same.
Yeah.
So and I really struggled with orthorexia, which for people listening is more sort of an obsession with eating clean. So it's like I would, kind of remove like big food groups from my diet, types of foods I was really afraid of for a long time, which is actually where the idea for our product came from, which we can touch on later.
Yeah.
And then exercise bulimia was huge for me as well. Like just over exercising, moving my body in order to burn something off that I had eaten the night before. So to answer your question with like the therapy part, I didn't really seek help until way later. I mean, I was like 10 years into my eating disorder because again, I was able to hide it. I was in denial, so many different reasons. So when I finally did seek treatment, it was just like, oh my gosh, it was like this whole weight was off my shoulders. Like half of my healing was done in that first phone call because I just never told anyone for so long. And so when I finally did, it was like, oh my gosh, I've been carrying this boulder, for so many years. And so that was really the beginning of when I started talking about it. And then I started talking about it on Instagram, which is kind of just spiraled.
I feel like that's like a weightlifting too. It's like, it's freeing to like actually feel like you can talk about that.
Yes. And it's, it was so interesting too. Maybe this is very millennial of me, but I actually felt like sharing it on Instagram was so much easier than sharing it with, my family, my friends, people I knew in real life, because, talking to my phone, it was just like this black abyss.
Yeah. You don't know who's on the other side.
Yeah. I couldn't see like the faces or who was listening. And so, I remember actually my mom called me because I started like, slowly talking about it. And then my mom called me and was like, what is going on? Like, I saw you posted something on Instagram. My poor mom, she's probably like, why are you on Instagram for me? So, but it was just easier for me at the time. Because I mean, I think anyone who's struggling can relate. Like, it's one of those things where it was my biggest nightmare to have someone find out that I was struggling with this. It's just crazy to me now, realizing that I actually talk about it as if I'm telling someone what I ordered for coffee, so it's really, I've come a long way in that regard, but it's totally possible for anyone listening.
Do you attribute the illnesses mostly to societal pressure and societal expectations? Is that like the overwhelming majority of what you attribute it to?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think definitely society plays a big role, but also, I mean, I grew up in a household that was, I never had any of my parents like commenting on my weight. I was like very athletic. I grew up playing sports. There wasn't anything external that anyone ever said to me because I was, in a thin body by like societal standards. Definitely there was like the influence of, like the Victoria's Secret fashion show or,
yes. Oh my gosh,
like different magazines. Cause I grew up like before TikTok and like social media. Cause I'm 30, so kind of that era, a 90s baby. And so there was like those things, but it's still, it's not as bad. Like, I can't imagine being a teenager now, like all the face tuning and like, just constant like bombardment on social media. I think what it really was for me was control, which I know is a big thing, just that false sense of control. And then also just, I had a very sort of like type A perfectionistic personality. And so, I just think seeing kind of how society treats people who are thin, women who are thin, women who are beautiful, my brain was like, okay, if I'm that way, I will be loved, I will be successful, etc. So it was sort of that, yeah. And it spiraled. And then I ended up studying nutrition at UC Berkeley, which is where I went for my undergrad. And that just like added fuel to the fire because again, I couldn't disguise it. And I was also learning so much about nutrition.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that like, I thought if I studied nutrition, I was going to unlock this, secret key that like everyone knew who was naturally thin. And it's just crazy again. Cause like I look back at photos and I'm like, I was so thin. Like, what was I seeing in the mirror?
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother thing is like the body dysmorphia, which I know a lot of people struggle with. So there's a lot of layers, basically.
Always is.
I honestly feel like I'm talking to myself when everything you were just saying. I'm like, the type A perfectionist, like all of those things resonate so much. And the Victoria's Secret fashion show, like part of my recovery when I was working with, a therapist a long time ago was unfollowing all the Victoria's Secret models on Instagram. She's like, you need to do it. It's not good for you.
Yes.
Like, okay.
You're like, I'm sure you're a great person, but you just
exactly like sending you love and unfollowing with love.
I mean, you do that too, though, where you're so obsessed with eating clean that I know you'll like want a piece of steak. Your listeners will forgive you. It's very rare.
If I want it, I have it.
It's like just have the slice, girl. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
It was bad. I think that for a lot of our listeners, I think that it's important to note, like, what was the point that made you ask for help? And like, I want to note that because I want other people to say it's safe for me if I'm going through this to ask for help.
Yes. So for me, it was less so, I think everyone expects it to be this like really dramatic rock bottom, you're like on the bathroom floor crying. I definitely had many of those nights. Like, don't get me wrong. I think it was every moment was such a struggle, just existing in that mental prison. But I think what really did it for me was I was just mentally so tired. Like I was in my, early to mid 20s. I was living in San Francisco. I was supposed to be having the time of my life. Like all my friends were there. We had just graduated college. I was working in tech. Like I had money to like go out and drink and go out to dinner. And I was terrified. Like I would get invited out to dinner and I would just be like, no, I'm busy. I would make up excuses. And so I was keeping myself so small in this prison. And the only way I can describe it, which you may probably relate because we have very similar stories, but to anyone listening is like, it really felt like I was living a double life because it felt like at all times there was this mental energy that was being sucked from me where, say I would be in conversation with you guys, for example. Back then, I would also be thinking about like, okay, what am I going to have for dinner? Or like, what did I eat for lunch? And like calculating calories. And planning. And it was just like, I'm exhausted just telling you this. Like, it was just such a drain, a mental drain. And I think it just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like there has to be another way. And now looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I did that for so long because now I'm growing my business and I need every percentage of my mental capacity. Like I don't know how I did it. So I think it was the mental headspace was really what did it for me. And I ended up reaching out to a therapist that I found on Instagram because I had never gone to therapy. My parents were very happy-go-lucky. They weren't anti-therapy, but it was definitely never modeled for me that it was something that was, okay to explore. And so I felt a lot of shame around it. Again, I felt like I wasn't bad enough, So when I saw this woman on Instagram who looked, kind of like me, was young and looked approachable and lived in San Francisco, I was like, okay, this is sort of my baby step into this therapy world. And she absolutely changed my life. So
I love that. And I think that is so helpful. Like for me, the same thing. I lived in New York at the time and I would get invited to dinners with my girlfriends and I would say no, or like drinks out with all the people in my MBA. And I would say no and I would just go home and sit at home at 24. And it was like, what am I doing? Like, what is going on? Like, why am I wasting so much of my precious like youth thinking about how many calories are in a cocktail? Like, it was crazy. And so that was really like a low point for me too, where I was like, okay, I need to ask somebody for help. And one of the other things that I now work on with so many of my clients is hormones and hormonal health. And for a really long time, a big part of what I was going through with food is also what caused me to lose my period. And so I heard you talking about that on another podcast. And I think that a lot of Western doctors are quick to just be like, oh, let's get you on birth control. Like this has nothing to do with what you're eating or your stress or anything like that. They like don't connect those dots. So can you talk to us about how you connected those dots and how you made sense of all of that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was so huge. So I remember like going back to even high school. It was like senior year of high school. I would maybe even freshman year of college at this point. So I'm like, 18, 19, and I still hadn't really gotten like a regular period ever in my life.
Oh.
And I remember my mom being like, I was like kind of a late bloomer, like it's probably genetic. And I went to the OB-GYN and they were like, everything looks pretty normal. I don't know why you wouldn't be getting your period. Never asked me like, how's your stress levels? How much are you eating? And again, like I looked athletic, I looked normal, quote unquote normal. Like I looked at a healthy weight. And so I don't think they ever would have connected the dots. But like, my eating disorder started when I was like 14 or 15. And so that's like through those like formative years, developmentally, I was, even if I wasn't, starving physically, I would go through periods of starvation and then binging. And my body was under extreme like mental stress as well. So of course I didn't get my period. And, then that continued into college. And then, after I sort of started to heal my relationship with food, I still wasn't really getting my period. And what I realized was, I think you may also relate to this when you start to, heal your relationship with food. I had like different phases where, I thought I was recovered, but there was like still some behaviors where it was like, you're getting there, but you're not like fully there.
Yeah.
So there was a period where I was like definitely loosening the reins around food, but I was still really terrified of carbs. Like I wasn't eating a ton of carbs. And so finally I kind of had this like, come to Jesus moment where I'm like, I am screwing my fertility. Like I need to really get serious here. And this was in 2020. So only like 2 years ago is when I really started to like buckle down with, okay, I need to get a normal cycle. Cause like there was some times in there I had an IUD and I was like, kept blaming on the birth control. I'm like, well, that's why I'm not getting my period, And my doctor was like, you need to just ramp up the carbs. So I'm eating carbs like, every meal of the day, which felt like so much to me. But now I'm like, yeah, that's normal. That's like whatever, unless you're like keto or something. I don't know. But at the time it was like, oh my gosh, so many carbs. And got my period within like, it was just, and then there was no issues. There wasn't anything wrong with me. It was like, oh, what do you know? When you feed yourself all the macronutrients, like your body is going to thrive and work the way that it was supposed to. So I do feel really lucky because I was actually really nervous for a long time that I had like permanently screwed, my system up. But yeah, it's so crazy to me that like, one macronutrient like carbohydrates is, people tell you it's not essential. Like it is essential. It prevented me from getting a cycle, which is just, it's wild. So
yeah, I think that this is a really eye-opening conversation for so many people who haven't necessarily connected the dots themselves or might be wondering like, why am I only getting a period every 90 days or not at all? And so to like dig a little deeper and look at your lifestyle, because it's not just food. It could be that, like we talked about, like you're too stressed or you're working out too much or like so many different variables. And so I think that letting people know that a cycle is a really good indicator of your overall health and like where your health is at. And so it's just a great marker to be able to look at. So thank you for sharing on that.
Yeah. And you're right. The stress piece also, I did want to mention that was super important too. I think it's like, as you can imagine, once I'm loosening the reins around food, obviously my stress is coming down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's like, it's so many factors. As women are very complicated.
Yeah.
Indeed. Was your stress clinically coming down? Were you actually testing cortisol, or was more just, I just feel less heavy kind of thing?
Yeah, I wasn't testing it, but like definitely could feel the difference. And then like when it comes to working out, I was like before pushing myself to do like Barry's boot camp all the time. And I started switching to like beach walks and Pilates and, again, everyone's different, but like for me, it was like, sometimes it's not even stuff you can measure. It's just, I think with the working out, it was like, I don't like this. Like I'm forcing myself to do something because I know that it's just to burn calories. So of course, when I pivot to something else that I enjoy, my body's going to be like, yes, like this feels nice,
Yes.
So.
So maybe just in terms of today, walk us through like an average day for Allie in terms of food and exercise. What's a normal breakfast, lunch, and dinner look like for you?
Yeah. So my whole life, now I try to just be so intuitive. So I honestly couldn't even tell you, like tonight for dinner, I had like baked beans out of a can and some scrambled eggs because I just had the craziest day. And like, that's cool, And then last night, I went to a Sixers game because I'm here in Philly, and they reached out to us. They're like, oh, we want to talk about maybe some corporate partnerships. So I'm like, okay. So I rushed there after work. I had like, tequila soda. I don't even usually drink. Like my life is just very, I wouldn't even call it tequila soda intuitive, but it was just like, it just happened, it's like, and I just had to roll with the punches. And I think like that has really helped me a lot because especially as I'm growing this business and life is just so out of control in so many ways, I can't even like try, to control certain things because it's just going to stress me out more. So I think surrendering to, to what's going on has been actually the best wellness hack that I've ever had recently. Of course, like having certain, structure around things does help me. So like for me in the morning, I just love getting outside and, maybe it's a chill walk. Maybe it's a run. Lately, it hasn't been a run just because I'm so stressed in the rest of my life. But I really just try to do things really intuitively. Sometimes I stretch, like it's nothing crazy. And I think I was doing so much before that I'm trying to just lean into the art of doing less. I'm a huge, huge fan of, therapy in all forms. So we mentioned like obviously talk therapy, also somatic therapy. So I alternate between two different therapists. So I see like a talk therapist one week, somatic, which is like body-based therapy, which has helped me tap into my emotions a lot more. And yeah, I work from home. So I kind of just like whip up whatever is in the fridge whenever I have time. But I'm not going to lie, like it's not cute. It's not Instagram worthy. I'm pretty packed schedule wise. So it's sort of like, whenever I have time to shove something in my mouth, like standing over the kitchen sink, that's what I do. And that's kind of like crazy to me. Cause like, honestly, a few years ago, I would have been planning meticulously, every little thing. And now it's like, oh my gosh, today I was like, oh shoot, I didn't eat lunch. Like, and I realized because I started getting hungry and it wasn't like in a disordered way. It was just like, I was so preoccupied with life and business and I was busy and like, that would have never happened. And it's not that I ignored those hunger cues. Like I stopped, I ate lunch, I nourished myself, but it never fails to amaze me. Like, wow, this is what normal, people with a balanced relationship with food do is they listen to their body and they have hunger cues, but their whole life isn't focused around their next meal, if that makes sense.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that there starts to feel like there's so much freedom. So when I work with clients, I like to give them exercises and like journal prompts. Those are my big things to go through in terms of like starting to let go of fear around certain foods. And like you said, for you, it was carbs. Like for me, it was also carbs. And then at one point it was protein. Like there were like different phases of my life that I went through. But what was your best tool in terms of letting go of food fear and starting to just embrace more freedom with food? Do you have anything that you could give our audience?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, journaling is a great tool. I think that's a really good one. Getting stuff on paper. I wrote a letter to my body, which was something my therapist told me to do, which was so like, it sounds so simple. And I was like bawling. I was so emotional. And I was just like, oh my God, cause I felt so bad. Like when you start to kind of personify your body, you're like, wow, I've treated you like shit for so many years. And all you do is just support me and, keep me alive. And, it's like this endless unconditional love when here I am just like treating you like shit, basically. So that was really powerful. I think, the somatic therapy, as I mentioned, like just for so many years, I was really disconnected emotionally because I mentioned my parents were super happy-go-lucky and they never taught me what, negative emotions, like how you're supposed to deal with them. And so I would feel sadness, I would feel anxiety, I would feel boredom coming up and I would turn to food or I would try to numb out, by distracting myself with food. And I think once I really started to address those and process them and realize that they're just emotions in my body, they were way less scary. And I think that reduced a lot of my reliance on food as well as sort of like comfort food, so to speak. And then lastly, I love this idea of body neutrality, because I think when I was really just, really mean to myself, saying super negative things, body positivity and sort of like body love, it just felt so unapproachable.
Far off.
It felt so far off. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, this is not, I can never be that. And to be honest, like, there are days where I love my body. There are days where I don't, and that's okay. And I think just having that, that realistic expectation that, it's not going to be roses and butterflies from the get-go. And so I think also body neutrality was such an amazing idea for me, because it just removed the attention from my body. Because for so many years, I was so hyper fixated on it that, when I really started to just look outward, out of myself, that really helps things.
I think that a lot of women out there like expect to have a better body image overnight. Like they're like, oh, I put in 5 minutes of this work. I'm journaling. Like, why is this not working? And I think that there's
just humans, to be honest. Everyone wants instant gratification.
Yeah. I see it so often in the women that I work with. And I think that there's also, I think that what you're doing on Instagram is fantastic, because I think, and I know that's not the only thing you talk about, but I think that a lot of people who I follow now will say things like, oh, well, I'm healed now from an eating disorder, and I never think about food anymore, and I never think about my body anymore. And I just like, I don't know. I don't believe in that. Like, I think that like there are days where I love my body, like you said, but there are still days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't love that. But then I reach for a better thought, or I like try to choose something different to think about. And so, I think that there are still bad body image moments. And I think that it's not necessarily helpful for people to act like it just completely goes away. So I love that you brought up body neutrality, because I think that that's something that a lot of our listeners can look into more and try to research more and think about more.
What is body neutrality?
I'll let Allie talk about it.
I'm not familiar with these things.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's actually a good clarification question. I mean, just the idea that, you're not tying any sort of positive or negative emotion.
Different.
Or sort of indifference. And I know it sounds kind of like a negative thing, but it just, again, for someone who's been so hyper fixated on their body for so long, I think it was really freeing to be like, okay, I have a body. It takes me from point A to point B, but like it exists, but it's not good or bad. And just kind of trying to, live through those principles was really helpful. And then just last two things that, because I have lots of tips, because I've gone through many. I don't know if you want these many tips.
Yes, all the tips.
Yes, all the tips. So last two things, obviously adding in your fear foods. This is super helpful with a therapist. So like for me, it was, I was terrified of carbs. So like slowly I would do, half a piece of bread at one meal. And like over time, I worked my way up to being, comfortable. And I also challenged myself, like a year ago or something, where for some reason croissants were always scary to me. Like I just felt like they were such a big fear food of mine. So I was like, screw it. I'm going to eat a croissant every day for breakfast until it's not scary to me. And it was so liberating and so amazing. And it just brought me so much joy too. Like I think, and that's really the mission with our business, is like, getting back to the place when we were kids where you would eat something because it made you happy. You didn't eat something because it was good for you or because, it was healthy. Like you ate something because it sparked joy.
Yeah.
So that was huge. And then the last thing, people feel mixed feelings on this, but I had a really incredible psychedelic experience with my therapist. So I'd never done psychedelics before in my life. I was terrified. I was like, my brain's going to dissolve. Like I'm going to have a bad trip. And it was with medicinal mushrooms, psilocybin. It was the most incredible, profound experience of my whole life. I know not everyone has that experience, so I don't want a blanket statement like it's a magic pill. But for me, I just have never felt that level of body love that I felt. And it was just, it was something that I can't even describe, and I don't want to because it will like cheapen it. But essentially it was such a deep connection point with myself that I didn't think was possible. So that was like one of those moments that was really profound in my healing journey. And I think kind of like, catalyzed everything.
We've done a few episodes on it, and actually ours have been more focused around like traumatic brain injuries. And so we had an ex-NHL player on the show, and then we had a veteran, an ex-Navy SEAL. Yeah, I won't be shy in saying that for me personally, I think psychedelics have 100x the therapeutic capabilities of like marijuana and definitely Western medicine.
SSRIs.
So that's amazing. I think that's, and I share a deep love with croissants myself, so I identify with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey fam, if you are listening here, then you may be someone who deals with chronic overwhelm, bloating, anxiety, and weight you can't lose, maybe hair loss or skin conditions. If one of those things rings true for you, the Wellness by Kelley Health and Hormones course is available to help you get to the root cause and solve the issue in a way that's sustainable and gives you your lifestyle with lasting results. No more diets or quick fixes, but real health and vitality for the long run. My course runs through everything from what labs to test for to what protocols to implement given what's off in your blood work. We cover a variety of hormonal imbalances and how to heal them, plus the mindset work that you'll have to do to change your habits. If you're ready for an environment where you can learn the tools and truly heal to feel your best, most aligned, light, confident version of you, then this course is for you. If you're feeling called to join the WBK Health and Hormones course, head to the link in the show notes to learn more, where you'll get my membership included with your purchase.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that part of the reason you started your company and the foundational product was because of a gut health issue that you had when you were recovering from your eating disorder. Mm-hmm. So can you, before you tell us, because we want to go all into Oat Haus and what you guys are all about, can you talk to us a little bit about the connection between disordered eating and gut health issues? Because I think that a lot of people are just like, I'm bloated all the time, but they don't see the fact that the restriction is what actually led to the bloating and the abdominal distension and the discomfort.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was just constantly bloated, and I don't know if it was being in fight or flight. I don't know if it was like force feeding myself vegetables and like high fibrous foods because they were low in calories, but my body wasn't actually like, you don't need that much fiber.
Yeah.
I think it was a combination of all the above. But I'd be curious to also know how many people who have struggled with an eating disorder end up developing autoimmune diseases, because I've just through, talking to people, I feel like the correlation is weirdly high.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like the fight or flight thing or, just your body being under chronic stress, but I also have an autoimmune condition now, Hashimoto's, which is common, but just interesting. So yeah, I really struggled with my gut health for many, many years. I never connected the dots. And again, that sort of also fueled my eating disorder, because I was like, oh, if I take this out or I only eat these foods, it's going to heal my gut. So it's sort of like, it
fuels the food fear for sure, because then you're like, I mean, I know even for myself and so many of the women I work with, it's like, okay, well now I can't eat rice because there's arsenic in rice, and I can't eat sweet potatoes because they feed SIBO. And it's like, well, wait, do you really even have any of the conditions that need to take these foods out?
You can find a reason not to eat anything in today's world.
Yeah, it can be.
Exactly. No, it's so true. And I was really addicted to different elimination diets. And I did AIP for a while, which is like an even stricter version of paleo. And it got crazy. And so of course, then, your stress starts to skyrocket. But kind of, where the idea for our company came in was, I couldn't digest nuts. So I was in my recovery, and I'm trying to just fill my body with nourishing foods and, sort of more calorically dense foods. And so my nutritionist was like, why don't you try sunflower seed butter or soy nut butter? Like, those are nut-free spreads. And I don't have any nut allergies, so I obviously never had to try those foods. And so when I tried them, I was like, these are so bad. I'm like, I cannot believe that this is what people with allergies have to consume.
They're terrible. She buys that crap sometimes.
I bought sunflower butter, but
I don't like it at all.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to diss any other brands, but it's an acquired taste. And so I was just personally, this isn't going to fly for me. I'm a foodie. I love the taste of food. This is not going to work.
Why no nuts?
Because she wasn't digesting them with her eating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just having a hard time digesting them. So in my mind, I was like, this is just a temporary thing. I thought this was just once I heal my gut, I'll be able to reintroduce nuts, not thinking this is going to be my business down the line. Like this is going to be like my career. And so just selfishly, I'm like, what can I create into a spread? And it was 2017, right around the time when Oatly and kind of oat milk was coming on the scene. And I'm like, oh my God, if they can make a milk out of oats, I can make a spread out of oats. So in my Vitamix blender, I'm like adding different stuff. Yeah. It was terrible. Tasted so bad. Hundreds of iterations later, still bad. And finally I was like, I need some help with this. Like I love food, but I'm not a chef. So we brought on our third co-founder, Ari, who worked at Michelin star restaurants, opened a restaurant in Paris. He's this like culinary genius. And thank God he put like the chef's kiss touch on our recipe. But yeah, that's where the idea came from, which was, again, it's all this like weird full circle moment.
So it's you, your partner, and
Ari, so Ari and my partner Eric went to summer camp together in LA growing up. So they were like childhood friends, which is like very wholesome and cute. But him and Ari had kind of like, just like drifted as people do when they get older. And so Eric and I were like, who do we know that's a chef? Yeah. And so serendipitous because Eric and I had a vacation plan to Paris, like a few months, before we launched the product. Is like September 2017. And we were like, oh my God, Ari's opening a restaurant in Paris right now. Like we should pitch him on the idea. So we met him for drinks, pitched him on the idea. He was so burned out from working in the food industry. I don't know if you know anyone that works in fine dining, but it's like so brutal. So he was like, I'm ready for something new. So yeah, we all got together and then launched like March 2018.
Amazing. And so you had like a loyal Instagram following before that?
Yeah. So yeah, my personal Instagram, I think I had, nothing crazy. I think it was like 10 or 15,000 followers. But for me, I was like, that's a great launch pad. Yeah. Kind of test market. So we actually, Eric and I were working in tech in San Francisco. As I mentioned, Ari was a chef and, none of us were like, we're going to build a food company. Like we were all kind of still a little skeptical about the idea. And I had a great paying job in tech. I was not really wanting to leave my like cushy salary. And so, and Eric was a consultant. He liked his job. And so we were like, let's just, test this online. We'll do pre-orders. We worked on it nights and weekends. We ended up actually working on it as a side hustle for the first year. So we got into Whole Foods, like we started getting into all these retailers and we hadn't even left our tech jobs yet. Wow. And then it finally got to the point where we were like, something's gotta give. So
that's awesome.
You don't have a co-packer, right? I read.
Oh yeah. We self-manufacture. So that was also a journey.
That had to have been a lot of work.
A lot of work. Yeah. I still have the, carpal tunnel. No, but Eric, Ari and I, we made the first 100,000 jars by hand in these like gallon Vitamix blenders. And I remember Eric would sleep in these like wrist braces because all of our wrists were just like trashed from doing this motion. And then, we just slowly worked our way up and now we have, about 12,000 square feet in a little outside Philly. And, we have like 15 production employees that help us make it.
So amazing. I want to get to that because I know Chad wants to know about the growth. Yeah. But I want to just talk about really quickly if you have any tips or what you attribute that like 10 to 15,000 follower base to. Like, what were you telling them? Were you being super vulnerable about your disordered eating? Like, how did you build that base for anyone who wants to start to build an Instagram following?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's such a good question. Want to preface it by saying Instagram was very different than it is today. Not saying that it's impossible now, but there was no reels. Like I was just posting, photos of my meals. But I think what really was, I guess, like, more of a hook for people or a little bit different was I was treating it like my diary, like my personal diary. So the captions were, I was really taking people through my recovery. It wasn't like, hey guys, look at me, I've made it to the other side. It was like, hey bitch, like I'm in the valley, like I am struggling. And I would like I remember taking a selfie like of myself after I had binged on like half a jar of peanut butter and just like flowing out of me like what I'm feeling. I feel so embarrassed, blah 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 blah. And I think it was so raw that it was almost shocking. And it was like, it wasn't the time of Instagram where people were being vulnerable. Like it wasn't cute. It was like, it was kind of choppy and like a little bit uncomfortable. And I think it was just interesting for people to kind of follow along with that. And I think a lot of people resonated with some of the stuff I was sharing. It was like, I talked about, I had eaten out of the trash like one time on Thanksgiving where my parents had like thrown away the rest of one of the pies, Thanksgiving pies, and they all went to bed, and I had like restricted myself all day, and then everyone went to bed, and I like tiptoed into the kitchen, and there was like a little piece of pie like sitting on top of the trash, and I was like, it's not really touching anything, and I'm like talking about how I'm like justifying it in my head, and people like, everyone's like, oh my God, I've done that too, like I thought I was the only one. And so I think it was really this like, just that like raw vulnerability, so people felt the space to share their experience as well.
People love connection, and they love connecting to a story, and they love people who are vulnerable and honest and real, because I think we're all going through something, every single one of us at any given point in our life. And so when you have somebody who is there on the other side to be like, it's okay for you to feel this way, you're not abnormal, it creates this connection point. And so I think that what you did was really amazing, and that's why you have such a loyal community. So I think that that's really helpful.
I do that. Paul Rudd made me feel better about this from Mrs. 40, but like if I have cookies and I throw them away, I'm like, this sugar's addictive. I'm like, man, I can use another one of those. I'm gonna dust it off.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, yeah. In my disordered eating, there were multiple times where it was like, it turns into a binge, right? And then like, you're like, oh God, like, what am I doing? Like, you like are almost like, it's almost like a little bit of a blackout. And then you check in with yourself and you're like, wow.
No, it really does. It feels almost like primal in a way of just like, I think
your body's so hungry.
Exactly. I think that's what it is, because there was, and then of course I made it like, oh, I have no willpower, and it's like, no, bitch, like you're starving yourself, like it's your body's keeping you alive.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Your body is just doing what it needs to do in order to like keep you healthy. So yeah, I think that's definitely helpful information.
Yeah, I can't have sugar. If I have like a bag of Oreos or a box of Oreos around the house, like I just can't have them. I'll just wake up in the middle of the night and it's like an addiction. Not trivializing, of course, but I do have like an addiction to sugar. And it's not helpful. So I'm really interested about Oat Haus. We have it in our house. We think it's excellent. I worked at Shopify for many years, so I'm familiar with the brand. I think one of the areas that so many founders struggle with is how to get from 0 to 1, like that ideation phase. And so you touched on it a little bit, but where were you in the process in terms of like, did you formalize an LLC? Did you actually were you looking at branding? It sounds like, did you go retail first or direct to consumer? I mean, what was like the thoughts behind all those initial steps?
Yeah, the beginning was so messy. I want to tell you, we had like a very clear cut business plan.
Most don't.
No. So yeah, I guess we started D2C, as I mentioned, with Instagram. And I mean, we were just like social first, we weren't even really, we had a very kind of bare bones website. But most of our marketing and everything was just on Instagram, because I don't have an MBA. Like that's what I knew. I loved social. I felt like I was really good at it. It was cheap. And we were bootstrapped, we were trying to like prove product market fit. So we really started there. Retail, we ended up getting into Whole Foods in June 2019. So almost a little over a year after we launched. But again, there was no strategy behind it. We were kind of just like, Whole Foods seems like the logical next step. Let's do it. And, we did well enough in retail that they ended up expanding us into a couple more regions, but we were like probably bottom third, like middle of the category in terms of velocity. So, that's how they measure like how quickly you're selling and moving off the shelf. And that's because we didn't have a strategy. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing. And so I think we really, kind of just like threw shit at the wall and wanted to see what would stick. So wouldn't really recommend that, to most people, but it ended up, somehow working out. But I agree with you. I think that 0 to 1 place is really, it's just hard. And it's hard to give advice even, because every business is so different. Like, we started around the same time. We're both from San Diego as June Shine, the hard kombucha company.
Of course. Yeah.
And oh my God, I remember I grabbed coffee with one of the founders, and it's like, talk about a different trajectory. Like, obviously the alcohol space is so different, but they raised a ton of money. And all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, come on over to, our facility. We just took over the Ballast Point brewing, manufacturing space. And here we are, like, we're still making it in this commissary kitchen in these little Vitamix blenders. And they have this like beautiful, shiny facility. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm just like, we started at the same time. But every business is so different. We bootstrapped, right? And they raised a bunch of money, and it's like totally different paths. But yeah, I think the early days were messy, and that's okay. We learned a lot. And then when it comes to, branding, we actually ended up rebranding July 2020. So we rebranded 5 days before we went on Shark Tank, which was crazy. But that was like a whole thing in itself. But I think that really ended up catapulting the brand, elevating the brand. And then once we started hiring, our VP of sales, really getting things tighter in retail, now we're, the third best brand in our set, and like turning really, really great in a lot of, Sprouts and Whole Foods. So I think it takes time. And I think something that social media, it does bother me on social media, is you'll see these brands and like, they're seemingly overnight successes, and you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. There's so much trial and error that happens in the beginning that oftentimes people don't see. But we just see sort of the end product in these like, glossy brands. And so that's why I really like to try and show like the not so sexy parts too, because I just don't want people to have a false sense of what being an entrepreneur is like.
Yeah. Well, for everyone listening, which many already know, food and beverage is really hard. So I've known a lot of friends in it. I've been an investor in it. Super hard to succeed. I think 9 out of 10 end up failing. And I think one of the beautiful things in how you started, and candidly, what you lose when you go retail first or you go third party first, is you lose a direct connection to the consumer or your customer, including the data, et cetera. And so I think that's really powerful, because you were able to control the narrative, and you were probably getting really direct feedback all throughout, because you know the consumer, you're building it on social, they're checking out with you directly. So, you're keeping control of all that.
Yeah, especially with a product like ours, which was a completely new idea. So people were like, granola butter, what is it? Tell me about it. Like, I think starting D2C was so important for us. And we leveraged a lot of influencers. We still do. We actually have now one of our marketing gals, her role is like full-time influencer marketing. She just like cranks out. We send out hundreds of packages a week to influencers. And, but that really helped us in the early days, because, it's one thing for a brand to be like, try our products, like granola butter is the best, but it's different if all these influencers, who you really trust are talking about it. So it helped a lot with the education early on too, which is also why I think it took us a while to succeed in retail, because, you don't have any context when you're walking down the aisles in retail. So you see something on the shelf that's $9.99 and you're like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to go with my peanut butter. Thank you very much. So it took a while to kind of like get that education out there.
Yeah. Well, one of my buddies runs it's like a in the field marketing company for retail. So like they do all the tastings, they do the shelf assortments, et cetera. It's hard to control the narrative in those stores.
It is.
And I think one thing, just to keep the compliments rolling, you do very well that I identify with, and I know a lot of people do, and RX Bar and others nailed this too. It's like complete transparency of the ingredients, and it's a simplified list, and it's actually, like right in your face.
They thought they lie.
Well, yeah,
I know.
But it is on the front. Well, yeah. That's unfortunate to hear, but I think that's what made them successful.
It is. Yeah, definitely.
Something similar that she does is just transparency, because everyone's nowadays more educated, or seemingly more educated, and they're looking at the list and they're like, oh, that's crap. And so I love how even on the website, it's like right in your face, and you just kind of feel better about the choice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the tough thing in retail, is you have like a split second to grab someone's attention. Yeah. I mean, think about when you're in the grocery store. It's like, it's different from a D2C. Like, you're not on someone's website. You can't see their whole story. You can't see like why they started the product. It's like, 1,000 products like in your vision, and it's just, sensory overload, and your kid is screaming at you from the grocery cart. So like, yeah, you have like one split second, which is why I think the D2C and sort of online social landscape is so important for us, because, if someone sees us on shelf, they're like, oh, I think I saw that brand on TikTok. Like maybe we have a fighting chance, but otherwise probably not.
So what's next? Are you trying to get into different SKUs or just keep growing what you already have? What's kind of the future state for Oat Haus?
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to be launching with a national retailer next year, which is super exciting. Can't tell you guys who yet, but you can probably guess. And then we are going to be, launching more flavors as usual. The short sort of like limited drops work really well for us, just like raising sales across the board. And then we're also going to be expanding beyond spreads. So we have a few different products in R&D right now, just different categories because, I love spreads, but as you can imagine, the velocities in that category aren't super fast. So it's not like ready to drink beverage where people are buying, one of those at their lunch hour every day. So it's like, you don't go to the grocery store every week and buy a spread. Normally it's maybe, every other time or something. So getting into some faster moving categories, more snackable stuff like that. So
that's awesome.
And then from like a marketing mix perspective, what's been really valuable? You talked about, influencers, the social aspect. Are you doing any paid marketing? You're doing any more traditional?
Yeah, we're doing some paid stuff. I mean, it really, it just hasn't been performing as well since the iOS change. And I know for everyone across the board, it's been such a nightmare. And so luckily for us, we never relied on that. Like we were never a purely paid ad brand, thank goodness. And so I think those limited drops have helped because anytime we do a limited drop, we'll do ads that say like get early access to, our new flavor. Those tend to do like ROAS wise pretty well, but everything else is like ads aren't really performing that well for us. We've tried TikTok. Those are expensive. It's like $100 a conversion. We're like, this sucks. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong, but like TikTok is not performing well for us.
No, I'm with you. I'm like the same way. I was trying to do like just boosting, like for boosting posts. And then I did like a few ads on TikTok and I'm like, this is not,
That's why I asked. The whole ad landscape is getting totally reconstructed. It's very interesting. I work with merchants all day struggling. So no, you're not alone.
Okay. Yeah. It's super interesting. So we've actually been trying to funnel that money into, other things. So like doubling down on influencers. We've never done anything with affiliates just because, historically the food and bev industry, our margins aren't as good as like fashion or beauty. But yeah, we've really been looking at pushing more affiliates and then, we're trying to hit it hard with retail. Cause ultimately that's like where you scale as a food brand. So
the limited drops are things that you've done with influencers, right? Where you'll like,
so we've done, so Jamila Jamil, she's one of our investors. We did like our brownie batter flavor with her. She was just in a Marvel movie. She was one of our like bigger collabs. And then we've also partnered with Brock Your Body, who's like a food influencer. She has a super loyal, engaged following. So that was really interesting to see like, it's not necessarily the number of followers. I think she has like 300 or 400,000, where Jamila has like 6-7 million or something. But I think it's so interesting. Like she has such a niche engaged following and she like fucking crushed it with, bringing all her followers to the Oat Haus. So yeah, we've been looking to do a few more of those, but it just gets tricky because, obviously influencers come with managers and, it just sometimes a lot of the like, red tape and political stuff gets just time consuming. Where I'm like, I love just like a cut and dry, like we'll give you a percentage and we can just call it a day. But sometimes it gets a little complicated. So
have you taken institutional money at this point or is it just those kind of private investments via influencers mostly?
Yeah. So we're actually currently raising our seed round. So we're raising 1.5, but we've only raised about 600K to date with the friends and family round. So that we closed that December 2020. So we're super lean, like very bootstrapped, and we're profitable. So that helps as well. I think, especially in this economy, and this environment, I think self-manufacturing helps with that too, just like supply chain wise. But, I mean, it was just interesting, like so many investors when we were raising our last sort of friends and family round, like very small round. Literally our lead investor was Eric's older brother. And we were raising and all these investors are like, you got to be raising more, you got to be burning money, and like growing at all costs.
Growth.
Now, and we literally just had a call today with a potential like lead partner, and they were just like, I love your capital efficiency. Like, this is so attractive. And we were just like, oh, all these investors, where were you 2 years ago? Like, they all come crawling back. And it's just so interesting how, I think just the tone changes depending on, I guess, the economy, obviously. But yeah, it's just interesting. We're like, we've been doing the same thing, and you guys didn't think it was cool 2 years ago, and now you think it's like really cool. So
I'm just such a believer in the lean startup, and I know you've talked about it before, and I've read about you saying things about it, and it's just, it's coming much more into favor, obviously, at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, we talked to Henry Schuck 2 weeks ago, who has a multi-billion-dollar business, and he bootstrapped it. And so depends on the business, of course, but I think it's a really efficient model that, founders should embrace perhaps more often, because VCs are always going to convince you to raise as much money as possible. It's the truth.
Totally. Yeah. And people like, they like the idea of doing it, but then in practice, like, it's not sexy. I didn't pay myself for the first 3 years, and now I'm paying myself a $35K a year salary. Like, I do have Instagram to, help with that. But it's just like, it's not really cute all the time, and it's not social media sexy. So that's maybe why people go the VC route too, which I get.
I think how he described it, which was impactful, was he was saying he knows how to do everything in the business. He knows how to be the marketer. He knows how to be the CEO. He knows how to be the accountant. And like, that means a lot. And I think it all goes back to like a founder's mentality. And so I think it's really important. How many employees are you right now?
We're almost 30. Most of those, as I mentioned, are production, but we're still super lean. Like, we have a VP of sales, a few marketing hires, and then, Eric, Ari, and I do a ton. Like, Eric is HR. He's like our finance. Like, he's sometimes, we're still in the facility when people call out. Like, we were in the facility this weekend. So it's very scrappy. But I think that is also can be our downfall. And I'll be the first to say that, can be our biggest weakness is operating in that way only gets you so far. And then you have to, start to spend money to make money. So we just put a job posting out for a retail marketing hire to support this national launch next year, a production kind of facility manager, so we can get out of the facility and work on growing the business. So there's certain things that I think you have to let go of that control too, because you're just used to doing it for so long that you're like, wait, this is holding me back now.
Yeah. When you scale, it becomes inefficient. Definitely. It's just kind of knowing when that inflection point is versus maybe doing it too early. But that's a great story. And as we've said, we love your products. We feed it to our kids pretty much every day.
Aww.
So I have a few more questions for you, but one thing that I think is really fascinating is that the fact that you're doing this with your partner. This podcast is something that we love doing together. It's nice to have something.
Most times.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So
she's the visionary.
Nice.
Yeah.
The doer.
I'm calculated.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit more risk averse.
So for you, I think the first thing, and I want to bring this back to like earlier in our conversation, like you guys have been together a long time. We've been together for a really long time too. And one of the things that I really had to work on, we broke up actually between our relationship. We dated for 4 years, and then I had to go work on myself. Like I had to learn to love myself and to treat my body with respect and all these different things before I felt like we could come back and have a relationship that was going to work. And so for you guys, did you ever break up? Were you working on your body and your body image like through the process of you guys being together? Like how did that look, and how has your relationship changed since your relationship with food changed?
Yes. Oh my gosh, what a great question. Yes. I mean, there's so much there. I'll try to keep it short, but yes, essentially, I mean, we've had our ups and downs. So we met in college, which just obviously to give you some background, very different time. Yes. We were both drinking like fish. We were party animals, like weren't planning on ever starting a business together. And so just, I think meeting in that environment is so funny, like looking at us now because things are just so different. And I think it's, yes. Were you guys also college?
Yeah. USC. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Party, fight on.
Yeah.
And so I think just, it's been really cool that we have continued to grow together, because I think it could have gone, we could have totally grown apart. Like if he stayed, drinking and partying, or I did. And so I think this business actually really helped us like grow together in that way. But like we're definitely not perfect. And I remember right after we graduated, Eric took a job out in New York and I was in San Francisco. So we like tried doing an open relationship for a hot minute. And I was like, that didn't work. No. And so then that never worked. And so then we came back together, and he moved to San Francisco. And I think then once we started the business, it was just, oh my gosh, it was so rocky in the beginning because, you're just like both doing everything, there's no traction. You're working on it like 24/7, which feels like we still are, but now at least we have some support. And so I think we've at least gotten into more of a groove now. And, he manages more operations and logistics and production. And then I'm managing our marketing team. So we have some separation there. I mentioned I work from home and he goes into our facility. So we also have that separation, but I cannot imagine like not doing this together. I mean, that's a whole nother thing is people will say, oh my God, I can't believe you guys work together. And I'm like, if Eric just had a 9 to 5 and I was like venting to him about all this shit that I'm doing, I don't think it would work, honestly. So, I think, yeah, but I also, if anyone's like thinking about working with their partner, it has to work objectively. Like objectively, we actually work really well together if you take like the romance out of it. Cause he's an engineer. It sounds like, Chad, he's pretty similar to you in terms of like very risk averse and like methodical. And I'm the one that's like, let's do this, let's do that. And so I think like, yeah, it fits that way. But then on the flip side, like, you really have to make an intention to remember that you're romantic partners too, because it's so easy to like only talk about the business, only, then you become business partners only and like roommates. And that's not the point of obviously being in a partnership. And so I remember one time we went out, it was like a date night or something. And I'm like, okay, no talking about the business. And we were just sitting there in silence and we're like, what the fuck do we talk about? So I think having your own hobbies and like having things outside of the business is super helpful. But yeah, we're not perfect by any means. It's been a journey for sure.
Yeah. You got to have your own lives and hobbies. That's like my number one. Because we both work from home. We have the business together.
We have kids.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very important to have our own things. So we
separate church and state.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about, I think that you kind of touched on this. Like you said that you do have like a little bit of light structure. Where you like get outside or, go for a walk or something like that. But are there any other, and like you talked about therapy too, but are there any other things that you do to care for yourself every single day?
Yes.
And maybe what's like the first hour between when you wake up and.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, like I have a tendency to be the type of person where, again, type A, I'll like add in, okay, I got to meditate. I got to, go for a walk, and I like add in too many things and then I'm stressed, right? So I think I've tried so many different things, and the number one thing that has helped me is not looking at my phone for the first hour of the day. And it's not always an hour, like, again, like we're not getting super rigid here, but if I can, wake up and I charge my phone downstairs because I'm an animal and I will like, I have no willpower. So if I charge it next to my bed, I'll look at it. So I like charge it in another room. And it's just such a nicer way for me to start my day, because the second I look at my phone, it's like I am sucked into another world where I'm just responding to other people. All of a sudden I'm like emailing people back and I'm like, I wouldn't expect them to email me back this quickly. Like, why do I feel this pressure? So it's really helped me, I think, just, be proactive rather than reactive. So that's the biggest thing, but I'm not always perfect. Like sometimes when I'm traveling or I get thrown off or, I just get out of practice and I'm like, wait, I need to not do this. That's probably the biggest thing. But yeah, I mean, I try to, move every day, as I mentioned. What else? But other than that, like those are probably my two non-negotiables, is just like getting outside, especially working from home. Because I find that, and now I'm on the East Coast and daylight savings, it's like got dark at 4 p.m. today. So I won't leave the house. Also something that's been really helpful I got one of those walking pads under my standing desk. So I don't use it all day, but like sometimes in the afternoon, if I'm feeling like kind of sleepy, I'll walk and like answer emails or something for, 30 minutes. And that's been just really nice if like, especially being on the East Coast, the weather is not as nice as California. So it just helps like get the blood flow and, I stay more awake.
I think the no phone in the morning thing is something that like almost every successful person we've talked to has said. And I know for me,
I got to put that shit downstairs or somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm just like you, like over there, it's looking at me.
For me, like at least like if for today was a good day because my kids didn't wake up until like 7:45. And so when I was up at 6, I got to meditate. I got to make them breakfast. And I not being on my phone, like at least through that like little period where I'm making a green juice and I get to oh my gosh, it makes such a difference in not only like being less reactive, but like I feel more connected to myself and I know more of what, like, is this a day where I feel like I want to be more introspective or I want to share more on social media? Like, because if we dive right into our phones, then the expectation is like everyone else's stuff is being projected onto us. And so when we can take the space to connect to ourselves first before seeing all of that, it gives us so much more clarity on like what the actions should be that day and like how it would feel aligned.
Absolutely. Oh, that's honestly, if I could delete TikTok, I would. Like, because that's especially like Instagram. I actually don't. I mean, I guess watching people's stories, you're like getting that. But oh my gosh, and I feel like I have to like watch it because I'm like, oh, I have to keep up with trends. If I'm like, because I create a lot of our content, which I guess I really don't. Like, I could just create my own stuff. I ended up doing that anyways. But like that, especially, I think also if you're the type of person that's I feel like a sponge with people's energy. And like, I've always felt that way. And so I think especially social media, like, I feel like I just soak up, like I'll be on TikTok. I'm like, this can't be healthy. I'm, all of a sudden I'm crying because there's this dog that died. And then the next one is like a funny cat video. And then the next one is like a murder thing. And I'm like, my brain is like doing all these things. And I'm like, it's 6:45 a.m. Like, what am I doing? So that was the moment where I realized I'm like, I cannot do this. Like, this is so bad. But again, you have to think like the smartest engineers in arguably the world go to Facebook, they go to all these companies and they're literally programming this app for you to stay hooked. And it's working. They're really good at what they do. But, it's tough. It is.
I love that you said that. I think that is a great place to leave this conversation and leave people to think about, I think that like really considering, I took the whole month of October off social media. And
how was that?
It was amazing. It was so good. I did
took my life off. It worked well too.
Not on it at all. But like that's where my business is. And so for me going into it both times, I did it last year in July. There's a lot of fear around it at the beginning because it's like, oh, am I going to lose sales? Am I going to lose followers? Am I going to lose people who I'm trying to help and engage? Like there's still like a part of me that wants to help people all day long. But at the end of the day, it's like I get so much clarity on like what my presence in my own life needs to look like and what boundaries need to be there all the time, because it is really easy to just get sucked in and to be on it all day long and to be not only creating content, but looking at other people's content. And so stepping back and gaining some perspective, I think it's something that I want to do at least once a year, if not more, because I just feel better when I have that perspective.
That is so encouraging because that's actually been holding me back is like, oh my God, I'm going to lose. Yeah. Cause it's like a marketing channel for you. But I have a birthday trip next month coming up to New Zealand. And I already was planning on just disconnecting, and this confirmed, like, I'm going to delete Instagram for that time. And it's
Girl, do it.
Yeah, you inspired me.
It's great. It's fantastic. And I think that like it gives you, like, even with your partner, like you have so much more space to connect because there's nothing in your mind that's distracting you about it. So yeah. Anyways,
the lovers and the haters will be there
when you get
how long you're gone.
Thank you so much for being with us, Allie. I feel like today was such a good conversation, and there are so many like nuggets of advice, whether you're looking to start a business or you're, in eating disorder recovery and everywhere in between. So thank you for all of the knowledge you just dropped.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. You guys are awesome. This was so fun. Such an easy breezy combo. It was great.
Thank you so much. And where can they
where can everyone find you? Leave our listeners with that.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, our product is Whole Foods, Sprouts, Amazon, our website. Instagram is just my name, Allie Bonar. And then Oat Haus is just oat.house, and it's HAUS.
Gotcha.
Perfect. We'll put that all in the show notes.
Are you working Erewhon over? Wink twice.
Erewhon?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were actually our first account, I think.
Amazing. We love that place.
They're a great account. It's like you can spend your whole paycheck in there, but they have all the like newest cool brands. So
believe me.
Cool.
We always go and I'm always paying.
Nice.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
We really hope that you enjoyed that episode. You can follow me on Instagram at Wellness by Kelley. And if you're new around here, you can sign up for the WBK 7-day free trial, where you can get access to all of my low impact workouts, blood sugar balancing, plant-based recipes, and guided meditations, all available on wellnessbykelley.com and on the WBK app.
Hey, thanks for listening.
Please make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also connect with us on social media at Wellness by Kelley. Drop us a DM for who you want to hear from.